It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Today, we're talking with the innovative 3PL. That's one of the fastest growing transportation companies in the country. So stay tuned for a great conversation. We're going to be working really hard to increase your supply chain leadership IQ. A quick programming note before we get started here today. If you like this conversation, be sure you find us wherever you get your podcast from and subscribe for free so you don't miss a single conversation just like this one. All right, with no further ado, I want to welcome in our featured guest here today. We have Karl Fillhouer joining us, Vice President, Sales and Operations with Circle Logistics. Karl, good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
Great to have you here. I've enjoyed the pregame. And joining you is Joe Donnell, Senior Director of Operations, also with Circle Logistics. Joe, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, really enjoyed getting to know you both, getting to know your operations. I tell you, y'all have been on the move, and we look forward to sharing some of that with our audience here today. All right, so Karl, let's start with you. Before we get down to business and talk about what Circle Logistics is doing, let's get to know you and Joe a little bit better. So, Karl, where'd you grow up? And give us the goods on your upbringing a little bit.
So I was born and raised in Wisconsin, a town called Appleton. Lived there and went to college in Wisconsin. So through most of my, if not all of my childhood, a Wisconsinite. After that, moved to Minneapolis, worked in that marketplace for about 30 years. And today I find myself in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow. Okay. What's been, so you grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, is that right?
Correct.
And you're still a big Packers fan. What's really unique about beyond that enormous Packers community? What else is really unique growing up in Wisconsin?
I don't know if there's that many things unique. Wisconsin was a great place to grow up for a kid, just like any other Midwestern state. It was a long time ago that I grew up in the times have changed quite a bit, but Wisconsin, from what I know, is still the same old good old Midwestern state with a lot of good opportunities for young people and a great place to live.
Yeah, a lot of good people too. And of course, you're out in Phoenix now. Phoenix, I've been to Phoenix once back before the world changed in last February. And what a beautiful part of the country with wonderful people and incredible food. So I'm very jealous. I love where I live, Karl, but I'm very jealous of you living there in Phoenix.
Well, this is the time of year to be here.
Love it. And we were talking pre-show with your telescope just over your right shoulder there. You had some great shots of the grand conjunction, I think is what they're calling it, of the planets getting together. So we'll have to feature that in the show notes, Karl.
All right, we'll do so.
All right, so Joe Donnell, let's bring you into the conversation. So same question, where did you grow up, and you got to give us the goods on your upbringing.
All right, born in Cincinnati, spent a short time there, a short time in St. Louis, a short time in Little Rock, and we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I am now, when I was in the third grade. So I've been here in the upper Midwest for a long time. So that's kind of the route. Right.
So you moved to Fort Wayne when you were in third grade. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of folks might be surprised about all of the inventions and innovation that's come out of Fort Wayne. I want to say, I may have this wrong, so Joe, correct me. I want to say that refrigeration started in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
I wasn't aware of refrigeration, but the guy that invented the television was from Fort Wayne. And of course, everyone knows where the magnetic wire capital of the world. Right. Everybody knows that.
Sorry, there's an international day that celebrates that, I'm sure. So Joe, growing up in Fort Wayne, what was in all of it? I mean, all the cities you mentioned, sounds like a great childhood. But what's special about that part of Indiana?
Well, it's Fort Wayne's population probably is around 200 to 250,000 with the greater metropolitan area. Great place to raise a family, learn some Midwestern values, have some work ethic. We're here in the middle, kind of auto parts capital of the United States. The most recently built General Motors assembly plant is 5 miles south of where I'm sitting. So we've got auto parts and a lot of just Midwestern work ethic kind of stuff up here. Great, cheap town to raise a family in, really.
That's important too. And, we were talking pre-show. Karl is our resident Packers fan, and Joe is our resident Indianapolis Colts fan.
Yep.
Packers in the playoffs. The Colts are rebuilding. They'll be back. So we'll save the sports for the follow-up conversation. So let's talk about Circle Logistics, or before we get there, let's talk about what you did professionally prior to what you're doing with Circle Logistics. So Karl, let's start with you. Tell us, a key role or two that helped shape that worldview of yours, and then I'm going to ask you about your eureka moment.
Okay, so I started in the industry back in 1983, which was shortly after the deregulation of the industry kicked off. Deregulation of air freight, LTL, truckload, pretty much transportation was changed completely through the 80s. And I was fortunate enough to work with an air freight forwarder that was one of 2 or 3 air freight forwarders at the time in 83. And over the course of the first 5 to 10 years of my career, I was able to work not just for an air freight forwarder, but we were an LTL consolidator, as well as a distribution operation. So I was able to touch all the different parts of supply chain. From there, I went on to have my own business, ran that for a few years, ran into some financial problems, had a couple of big accounts go down on me, left that having my own business and joined the 2 gentlemen that hired me right out of college 10 years earlier, again with an air freight forwarder and a consolidator. And then after a couple of buyouts, I was recruited by a large truck line that ran dedicated fleet operations as well as contract carriage. And I was brought on board there with a team of people to build a 3PL. So I've touched every facet in one way or another, and I've been able to watch things change drastically from the early to mid 80s until now.
Love that. You're going to have to write a book. Sounds like you eat supply chain for breakfast and seen it all. And I love your entrepreneurial experience. I bet that's been really helpful, owning your own company for a period there as you apply that perspective in working with different relationships.
It absolutely has. And I'll touch on the aha moment you asked about.
Yes, please.
So, when I first joined the industry, it was a lot different, looked a lot different than today. And as we entered the 90s, and really before the internet really took off the way it has, the aha moment was that most 3PLs and or carriers are managing and expected to manage information as much as freight. And the information piece is probably more important to most of the larger customers so that they can do the right kind of analysis and figure out which way they need to turn as they move forward. So the aha moment really is that we not just manage freight and the movement of freight, but we're managing a set of information for our customers.
Excellent point. Here in the information age, managing that information supply chain is just as critical. And it's really neat. We were talking pre-show about some of the things that Circle Logistics is doing from a technology standpoint. We'll touch on here later in the conversation. All right. So Joe, same question to you. Prior to Circle Logistics, what are a couple of key roles you had, and that aha is important too?
I came out of school in 1982 and immediately went to work for Arthur Anderson and Company in Chicago, Illinois, which is one of the big 8 back when there were eight large public accounting firms. Stayed there for 3 years. Didn't like Chicago at all. I was from Fort Wayne, which is a medium-sized, a smaller town. Chicago was a foreign country for me. So we hung out there for 3 years, and my soon-to-be wife moved up there with me, et cetera, et cetera. And then we were both from Fort Wayne. In fact, Fort Wayne is so small that her father was my pediatrician when I was a kid. And he, the joke in the family is that he would have spent more time, making sure those 12 stitches he put in the back of my ankle would have been a little bit nicer, had he known that 25 years later he was going to marry his daughter.
Right. Hey, blessed be the ties that bind, right?
It's a small world out there, bud. It's a small world. So anyway, so we moved back to Fort Wayne. I moved back with Coopers and Lybrand, another of the big 8 public accounting firms. Didn't last long there, because I jumped out to work for one of their clients, Tocon Corporation. I was the manager of internal audit and the manager of corporate accounting there for about 4 years. And when they first hired me, I didn't have my CPA. I'd been working for these big public accounting firms, but I didn't have my certificate yet. And so I made a mistake in the interview process, and I promised the CEO of the company that I'd pass the exam. So I spent the next 3 years studying for the exam. That was my eureka moment. It took me 3 years to get through because I flunked the thing 4 times before I finally passed it. But back in the day, the CPA exam was a 2.5-day test. I mean, 2.5 days of testing. There was a huge body of knowledge to get. And I didn't have it because I went to a liberal arts school. I was not an accounting major, et cetera, et cetera. But I promised the guy I'd do it. And finally I got through it and did it. But I gave up 3 years of my life. So the learning for me is that, if you tell somebody of authority that you're going to do something, you get it done. Now, hopefully it doesn't take as long as it took me to get it done. But when you fight the battle and you finally win, that's something that you can call an accomplishment. So that was very good for me.
I love that. And of course, global supply chain is built on commitments, right? And doing what you say you're going to do. So I love that. I do relate to your accounting trials and tribulations. That was my least favorite class in college. And I'm not going to tell them myself, but I may have just taken that a couple different times. So, all right. So
there's shame in flunking. Trust me. I'm living proof of that.
Well, I like kind of your two backgrounds and complementary, and Joe, one final thought on yours. Supply chain finance is front and center these days. So to have your background in that, that's a very valuable component as well. So that brings us to Circle Logistics, and I'm sure plenty of our listeners are familiar with Circle Logistics. But for those 3 or 4 folks that may have not heard of y'all, tell us, what does the company do?
So Circle Logistics is a 3PL that is asset-based, as well as being just a straight 3PL from a brokerage standpoint. We provide truckload, LTL, and air freight services to our customer base. Really, to put it in a nutshell, we provide capacity that's not readily available and easily available to large shippers through our relationships with many small mom and pop carriers. And we manage the conduit that holds everything together. So we give greater visibility to capacity and manage that capacity as if we were one large carrier. And we do it through a combination of using our own assets, as well as closely held partner carriers, and then larger carriers as well.
Outstanding. Joe, anything to add to that very succinct, in a nutshell definition? I like that, Carl. I'm jealous.
Yeah, we're going to get to the current situation and the growth that we've seen recently in the pandemic, which is a very strange thing to talk about, because you have this awful challenge that society has right now, and we find ourselves in a situation of high amounts of growth, such that we've never seen in the history of the company. And so there's a real weird dichotomy going on there right now that we're dealing with, and I know we'll get to that in a moment. But as far as what we do, we're doing a lot more of it this year than we were in previous years, as far as that goes.
Yep. It's been said, I think very well, back earlier this year. We had Kevin Bell, who's an attorney with Arnold Golden Gregory, and he mentioned a phrase which we really referenced numerous times during a very strange, uniquely challenging year like 2020, where he said, hey, you can find opportunity without being opportunistic. And the industry's been really busy this year based on a number of different factors, and I like how you put it there, Joe, because there is a weird dichotomy, right? But at the same time, the profession, the supply chain profession, is also serving a noble mission. And while sure it's driving business, there's also plenty of just sheer goodwill work being done that doesn't lead to a transaction. So this is a great year for the profession, and I think one of my favorite parts is that it really, the consumers and the public have really begun to recognize not just the very deserving healthcare frontline workers, but all the folks that make up global supply chain, why that's so important. So, but Joe, that's a great segue, because let's talk more about what Circle Logistics has been doing to fight COVID-19. And Carl, I want to bring you back in here, because we were talking about a lot of your efforts related to hand sanitizers pre-show. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have relationships that already existed with a lot of small regional distilleries and breweries. And as most of the public knows, that sector of business made a transition early on with COVID and started to produce hand sanitizer instead of beer or other alcohols. And we were able to very quickly establish what we would consider a new department or even a division within the company to move bulk hand sanitizer. And we put together a couple of projects in which we not only started to move hand sanitizer via tankers, but we would move it from the actual production to a repackaging facility where it would then be repackaged into consumer packaged goods. And then also we provided short-term warehousing and distribution where we picked and packed orders and actually got the hand sanitizer shipped out to the end users, whether they were companies, retailers that had hand sanitizer at doors, or restaurants, or just individuals. So we got deeply involved in that, and we found that through building the bulk transportation via tanker division, we were able to help out quite a bit. And it spurred a whole new piece of business for us.
Love that. And I think that's part of the good news, part of the silver lining here. Just all these, I don't want to use the word pivot. It's been overused so much, but these businesses have adjusted and found new innovative ways of not only fighting COVID-19, but driving business, which to stay in business, you got to find those angles. So your efforts though, as we learned, you both in September, November, between Stevie Awards, Bronze Stevie from the International Business Awards for Most Valuable COVID-19 Response. That's pretty impressive. But also from the 2020 Customer Sales and Service Awards, you were recognized as Company Response of the Year, creative ways companies are giving back during COVID-19. So that's got to be pretty rewarding to be recognized by third parties for your work.
Absolutely. And we're very proud of it. And really the credit goes to the entire team. We've got a great team of people that is now north of 200 team members, and they're spread out throughout the entire country. And every one of them is a contributor to what we do.
Yeah, well said there, Karl. So Joe, I want to pick your brain a bit as we talk about business, the landscape, here in this strange year. You were talking pre-show a bit about that constant demand, and it's just like a tsunami that keeps on coming. And you were talking about how logistics being that keeper of the last touch. Tell us more about all of that.
Yeah, pre-COVID, we were kind of rambling along at the same rate through the previous year, and life was pretty decent, pretty good, and we were hiring, 2 or 3 people every other month, to keep up with what's going on. And then COVID hit, and we do a lot of automotive parts and support for the automotive industry. So, and they shut down, for like 8 weeks. They shut the whole thing down. So all of that stopped.
Right.
And we sent people home. And I'm an old guy, and I've never worked from home before, and I didn't think it was going to work. But here I am still working from home. I've been in the office 3 times since last March, since we moved out, and that's it. And I'm, working from home now, and I didn't think it would work. But that's something that actually saved us too, because we found out we could work effectively remotely and still run a high volume 3PL brokerage company dispersed out. Now we had to do a few things to get that set up. We had to have morning meetings. We had to have morning video meetings, such as what we have here every morning. I'm on 3 different calls. Other people are on a bunch of calls to make sure people are up, moving, awake, and getting stuff done. Right. And sometimes you see people, in various forms of pajamas that you don't want to see, but at least they're working, getting stuff done, because there's a lot of work to get done. So anyway, we go back to March when the automotive thing shut down completely. I thought we were in trouble. I thought I might lose my job because volume dropped so dramatically. So we got through that somehow, and everybody held their breath, and the government provided some support, which was great. Everybody needed that support at the time. And that kind of held us through, and we kept it together. So then it got to July, and things started to pick up a little bit, and we're like, holy cow, volume's coming up. And then in August, they moved me from all the stuff I was doing back to recruiting people. They wanted to be involved, somebody with some experience to be involved in the recruiting process. So by October 15th or so, we went from 1 recruiter to 4 recruiters plus me doing it. And we try to hire all these people. So we've hired 50 to 60 people just in the Fort Wayne office, just from August 1st. And we were a 100-person office to keep up with the demand that started to show up. Because when the automotive guys came back, they were behind. There was pent-up demand for car purchases, right? I don't know why, but there's pent-up demand for everything. And my son, who works at an international paper plant, said they told us in July to run the plant full out as hard as you can go, because the demand by Amazon for boxes is going to be completely out of control, because all these people are going to buy this stuff and it's going to get delivered to their home instead of going to a retail store because of COVID. And they were right. I mean, so they've been running. So we're doing paper's gone crazy, automotive gone crazy, housing construction's gone crazy. So you've got that dichotomy of the economy that's doing great, and then you've got the leisure part of the economy that's not doing well at all.
Right.
So lucky for us, we're involved in servicing the industry that's doing great. So we've set sales records in November, a daily sales record. The Monday of Thanksgiving was the highest single day of sales that we've had in the history of the company. We just had the entire carrier sales team work Saturday and Sunday, and still on Monday morning yesterday, they woke up and had 79 loads on the board, which is one of the largest numbers of single day loads that we've had on the board at the beginning.
Christmas weekend. Yeah,
on Christmas weekend. Yeah, and they worked till 6:45 last night just to cover yesterday's stuff. So we're seeing a huge amount of economic activity. And the good news is that because we've hired everybody in Fort Wayne, Indiana, within 30 miles of the office that we could possibly hire, I mean, we've grabbed everybody we could grab. We found that we've started an office in Nashville, Tennessee, with carrier sales guys. We're trying to start one in Atlanta. We're hiring people remotely because we figured out that the remote thing would work, because we never thought it would work before.
Right.
And now we've got a guy in Hickory, North Carolina, working out of his house. We got people in Denver working out of their houses, all working for this little company, sort of medium-sized company in Fort Wayne, Indiana, right?
Well, so you shared a lot there, and a lot of good news there too, because what I admire, being a former Air Force guy, seeing the military, you just find a way, right? Improvise and overcome, whatever. I think Army mentioned that a while back. Just find a way to make it happen. And a couple things I heard there is just, that's what supply chain does. And that's certainly what Circle Logistics has done. Remote work has thrown a huge curveball.
Yeah.
So many businesses and sectors and industries, but you found a way to add to the payroll despite those challenges, hire people, get stuff done, GSD. And that's, in my view, at least, a big part of the silver lining of what 2020 has been about. And one last thought is all those hardworking folks to come in, give up their Christmas weekend because work and demand and serving others. And yes, business, but man, that takes serious commitment and dedication. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about FEMA, because I think so many of us here in the pandemic, of course, we're so fixated in supply chain or out on COVID-19, right? It's dominates news coverage, and you tend to, I think the human in us tends to forget about other challenges that takes place across the globe in any year, pandemic or not. So Karl, talking about some of the work that y'all have been doing with FEMA, tell us more about that.
So yeah, it goes without saying that the pandemic obviously is at the forefront of everybody's mind. But what most people forget is we also set records this year when it comes to natural disasters like hurricanes. And again, we've been fortunate enough to partner with FEMA over the past years, and we were able to support the efforts to support the communities that got hit by natural disasters, both with moving water and food supplies into those regions, as well as generators and other supplies needed for rebuilding. And we've been doing that for a number of years now, but this year certainly saw a spike in need when it comes to natural disasters.
Yeah, great point. And it was such a tough year. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal back before hurricane season, I think, and they were talking with 30 of the southeastern U.S. All the states that get hit with hurricanes typically, and they were kind of comparing and contrasting all the different approaches and planning, and some states couldn't plan because they were trying to bake in the pandemic response while they're trying to stage or think about shelter in place. It was such a uniquely challenging year, so I can only imagine some of the challenges y'all had as you work to address that annual need of serving those hit by hurricanes and other natural disasters. All right, so Joe, I want to bring you back in before we switch gears, and we'll talk technology here in a minute. I loved how you were talking about some of what's coming, right? As we thankfully finally get out of the year of 2020, just right around the corner. By the time this publishes, we'll be in 2021. But what do you think's coming?
Well, if you take what's happening, what we are seeing happen today, and you watch that demand curve go up and you see it blow right through the holiday weeks, which is what we're right in the middle of right now. Usually January, there's a lull in logistics because all the retail guys are filled up and have been filled up in previous months, and nobody's going out and buying anything. But we're seeing it blow right through the holiday weekend right now. But the other thing that I don't think people have quite figured out yet is when these vaccinations start coming and people start getting their shots and they're free to go out and consume, you've got 9 months of one of the richest countries in the world with pent-up demand. Okay, when that pent-up demand gets released, all that stuff's going to go on a truck, right? My clothing's on a truck. Everything that was built, this house is on a truck. Everything goes on a truck, right? And so when that pent-up demand gets released and we get these people with their vaccinations and we establish herd immunity, whenever that is, 2021 is going to ramp up, and 2022 is going to be a home run. Logistics is going to never have it so good, in my opinion.
Wow.
Plus you've got government stimulus coming in, right? Whether it's $600 or $2,000, guess what? People are going to have cash in their wallet and they're going to spend it. And what they spend it on, I don't know, but as soon as they buy that pair of pants or that tank of gas or whatever it is that they end up consuming, it's going to go on a truck.
Right.
Everything goes on a truck.
Well, and you're making a great point that I believe, our consumers these days, all of us, us sitting here and all the other consumers out there, have never been savvier and smarter and more aware, and certainly never had as much data at their fingertips. One other aspect of the silver lining is just the drivers, and as you put it, Joe, several times, all that goes on a truck for us to enjoy our convenient life here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, what we've seen at least is that appreciation needle starting to move a bit, and who knows, maybe folks will be a little bit easier on the interstates and how they drive around trucks, but if nothing else, recognize them for what they do and how they keep us moving and protect our psyche during these challenging times.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think you do have heroes in this pandemic. You've got, my wife is a critical care nurse. She works on the COVID floor at the local hospital. I've been married to her for 34 years. I didn't know she was a hero until February. And she's a hero, okay? But truck drivers are the same thing, right? They're the unsung heroes of what's going on right now, because who kept delivering things through the pandemic? Those guys did.
That's right.
It's not me in a cubicle at a 3PL somewhere. It's the guys who actually delivered the goods. And you're right, they do not get enough credit.
Yeah.
There's no way. And who's the hardest working guy on the planet? The guy who's maxing out his logbook every day.
Mm-hmm.
That
Great
guy.
point. Great point. All right. So now I want to talk about, there's so much more. I know we can't get to everything in this single episode, but I really enjoy all the different aspects of the response to fight COVID-19 in all the different sectors that Circle's involved in while managing and running a growing business. It seems like a good year, but a challenging year, a uniquely challenging year for sure. Let's talk about technology partnerships. So Karl, I appreciate your sentiment on the front end about, that information supply chain. And that's certainly a big responsibility here in the information age. Tell us more about some of the really neat things that Circle Logistics is doing as it relates to technology partnerships and innovation.
So we've over the last handful of years, in really a lot of things have been done this past year. we've done a pretty good job of partnering with the other technology providers. So obviously we've got a TMS and a system that we use internally to help manage our customers' freight movement and the information needed to do so. But we've made some steps this year to automate everything. We've automated the carrier onboarding process through a product called My Carrier Packets, which has allowed us to eliminate the better part of a department and really manage carrier vetting and carrier onboarding with a much smaller team. We use a variety of tools for tracking and tracing, both ELD tracking and tracing, as well as using the macro points and the forkites of the world to track cell phone flow and movement in different systems. We also then use a variety of different types of posting boards. Most small to medium-sized 3PLs are involved with DAT and with truckstop.com. Selectus is another board we use, Central Dispatch. Each one of these boards really seems to have a specialty that we rely on based on the type of business we're managing. And we've been able to pull a lot of that technology together and link it so that most transactions in most dispatches can flow almost 80% automated through our systems, which gives us more time to really manage the exceptions, which is what pulls us apart from everybody else.
Right. And that's what keeps supply chain very non-boring, is all the exceptions that you got to manage. Joe, anything, what else would you add in terms of the benefits that those technology platforms that Karl walked us through? What does that, at the end of the day, what do you believe that means for the customer?
Yeah, anything that can make it more efficient. You know, a booking a load is a transaction, okay? And it starts with an order that a guy has to get something moved from point A to point B, and then that order goes to some sort of transportation company such as ours, and we get the job done. Anything that can make that more efficient and collapse the amount of time that it takes to get that done is a win for everybody. So you will see technologies that will speed that process up, that will make it more efficient. You know, that'll just, you know, with what's going on in the technology field, that thing's there's gonna be improvements that are just gonna keep coming to the industry.
Yeah, agreed. And you know, give one less thing for your customers probably to worry about. I mean, as someone that has ordered freight before, you know, things happen. That's why supply chain exists, right? Things happen. But you know, when you've got more visibility at your fingertips and you can manage those times when things happen more effectively, and while streamlining the whole shebang. I mean, I imagine you've seen your service levels go up as a result of some of these innovative improvements.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we measure, you know, there's a number of KPIs, obviously, that are industry standards. We measure everything from on-time pickup, on-time delivery, what's happening in the middle, exceptions that might be missing freight with some types of shipments. All of that gets recorded and measured. And again, you go back to the exceptions. And anybody in the business would tell you that if 80 to 90% of the business flows smoothly and automatically, you can keep your eye on it. And there's a lot of time put into that last 10%,
right,
to make sure things are going smoothly.
So Karl and Joe, I've got not a curveball question, but I got a question I want to pose to you both. Given a year like 2020, we walked through some of those dynamics that are front and center for so many people. And then when we talk about technology and the implementation of new technology, new relationships, new platforms, what have you, if you're speaking to other business owners out there that are, you know, trying to figure out, you know, their own technologies that they're looking to implement, supply chain and otherwise, is there anything related to change management or management in general, but change management, technology implementation, project management? Is there one rule of thumb that 2020 taught you, you both and your management teams, perhaps, as you're looking to drive improvements in such a challenging environment, Karl?
I guess the one thing I would say is you can go to the old adage, trust yet verify. And technology is great and it does work most of the time. And if you can automate systems and make for a much smoother sleeker operation, that's great. You still need to be dotting your I's and crossing your T's when it comes to making sure the systems are working properly and are all in sync with one another.
Yeah. And it also seems like, you know, we see a lot of fear of missing out when it comes to technology. A lot of companies out there want the latest and greatest, even if they aren't sure how it works or maybe how it's going to impact and benefit the business. It seems like y'all have been very judicious and intentional about, you know, where to put those resources and that bandwidth with some of these projects here. Joe, anything? Would you add anything here?
Yeah, I think an extension of that is that there's going to be a generation of haves and have-nots, and that the haves are going to be able to incorporate the technology because they're smart enough to do it and make it work commercially, and the have-nots are going to hit a stumbling block and they won't be able to either afford it or implement it effectively, and that's going to be another thing that's going to separate the guys that are still around 5 and 10 years from now versus the guys today. I'm scared to death about small business right now and whether a restaurant survived the pandemic or not, you know. And there's going to be a lot of commercial shakeout, and we haven't seen the end of it yet because It's still going on, you know.
That's a great call out. Small business is in trouble in a number of different ways, you know, hopefully. Not sure about y'all spending habits here through the holidays, but I know we utilize a lot of small businesses in our neck of the woods more and more, you know, and use our spending power to help provide some support. But we'll see. Hopefully, 2021, you know, brings some relief across sectors, regardless of the size of the business. So along these lines, I want to kind of take the conversation broader here as we start to wind things down. You know, there's no shortage of trends and developments and challenges, but also good news across global supply chain if you look for it. Karl, what's one thing beyond what we've talked about here today? What's one other thing that you may be tracking more than others across global supply chain right now?
Well, as with most of us in this industry, we keep our eye on the shift from global sourcing to more nearshoring. So what kind of manufacturing is going to move, we'll say, from China or the Pacific Rim back into Mexico or some other country that's got affordable labor, that's heavily labor front facing. So we watch all of that. You know, COVID obviously has brought on some challenges. We've seen some problems at some of the ports with capacity. Today, we're dealing with problems with available containers nationwide for exports. So we watch that because that's going to affect how our domestic transportation piece moves. We provide service in and out of Canada as well as in and out of Mexico. So if you look at our part of the world as North America, we're still heavily influenced based on what's going on in other parts of the world. So we try to keep our eye on that and basically guess and or forecast what's going to happen next and how our capacity constraints going to change. As more and more small manufacturing pops up again within the US, transportation is going to have to change in order to support that from a lane standpoint and from a capacity standpoint.
Yeah, great point there. We were talking just the other day. If we think it's tough now, you know, the growth and the freight needs in the next few years is going to be, and we're not talking incremental. We're talking some massive shifts, at least what I've seen here in the Southeast. All right. So Joe, same question to you. There's no shortage of things to track, but what's one thing that really stands out that has your attention here?
Well, I think that as you go through what you just described as a step change move due to the vaccination and the improvement in the economic outlook, I think there's going to be some people, you know, related to what we talked about earlier, that are working on technology and have been for the last 9 months, that are going to be, if they get another 9 months underneath them, they're going to find themselves on the other side of the pandemic way ahead of other people. And I don't know who those people are, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think you're going to come out of this pandemic at the end of 2022, and the economic environment that you're looking at is going to be very different than it was in 2019.
Yeah,
just because of that. I think there's going to be a big move there.
Yeah, well said. So I feel like I'm getting a supply chain certification sitting down with the two of y'all in what we're facing here in 2020 and beyond. So I really appreciate what you shared, and hopefully our audience has as well. I want to, as we wrap up, I want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you and the Circle Logistics team. So Karl, let's start with you. How can folks compare notes with you?
We've got a website like anybody else would have, circledelivers.com, and there are links or tabs within that for Facebook, LinkedIn, and just email. So they can certainly reach out to both Joe and I via LinkedIn and or come in through our website and reach out to us through that.
Perfect. And to our listeners, we're gonna make it easy as possible. We're after a one click. So you'll find a lot of what Karl just mentioned on the show notes of this episode. And I'd invite y'all to check out what all the cool things that Circle Logistics is doing innovatively. They're tackling growth. They're certainly a big part of the noble mission that global supply chain is fulfilling as we, tackle the vaccine and beyond. So really have enjoyed. Joe, anything else to add in terms of, contact or any final thoughts that you might have?
Yeah, if you're a kid coming out of college and you're looking for a career that's going to jumpstart and it's going to rock and roll, I think we had a 2 to 4 year run here in supply chain, if not beyond that. You need to look at a trucking company, a 3PL company, or call me and I'll hire you because I think there's a big future here. The industry is going to grow and it's going to be a good place to be.
I'm with you. When I think about the visibility of supply chain, the profession, right? The craft, as an earlier guest put it, that has grown tremendously in recent years. It's going to continue to grow. We're seeing more and more companies elevate their chief supply chain officers into their executive team. So the upward mobility of supply chain careers is certainly going to grow. The compensation's getting better. Karl, you mentioned all the technology that you're implementing. That can be, supply chain is technology these days, right? And so if you love working with the latest and greatest, supply chain's a wonderful profession for you. So hopefully Joe, some of our listeners that may be matriculating through colleges much more successfully than I did will answer the call. Karl, I'm going to give you the final thought here along these lines, or what else?
This is a Circle Logistics class, and it is not half full. It's full. So come work for Circle Logistics.
So to our listeners that maybe aren't seeing the video, Joe literally just put a Circle Logistics cup to emphasize that point. So I love that. So Karl, I'm going to give you the final word here before we sign off.
So I'll echo kind of what Joe said. I mean, the industry in general, from supply chain, whether you're working at a large shipper or at some sort of a transportation or a supply chain provider, whether it's distribution or the movement of freight, whether it's air freight or truck freight or whatever, there's a lot of good things going on within that arena. And it certainly is a fast-paced environment. And for young people who are looking for an exciting career, this would be the place to come. Well
said. So, pre-show, Karl and Joe, you mentioned how y'all were the quite a 1-2 punch. Johnny and what was the
Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon.
Yeah, Johnny and Ed.
We're old, so we think that's funny. I don't know if you do, because you're not as old as us.
I love it. And y'all are just as advertised. It's been a pleasure to talk with you both. I love how you complement each other from a stories and perspective standpoint. So we'll have to have you back on again really soon. To our listeners, we have been talking with Karl Fillhouer, Vice President Sales and Operations with Circle Logistics, and his colleague, John, I'm giving you a new name, Joe Donnell, Senior Director of Operations. Thanks so much to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we only call Joe John on the weekends. Okay. It's a personal thing.
Oh boy. To our listeners, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Make sure you check out circledelivers.com. Of course, we'll have all other ways to connect with them in the show notes of this episode. You can learn more about Supply Chain Now at supplychainnow.com. A lot more conversations much like these, movers and shakers in industry. That's some of our favorite conversations. Of course, you can find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. On behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, this is Scott Luton signing off for now. But hey, challenging you like we challenge our team every day. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. Be like these folks here. And we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.